Hello, fellow introverts, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going over possibly the biggest and most explosive contribution to modern history, and also figure out why it was named after an island in New York.
The Manhattan Project, as it's been called, was one of the most significant scientific and engineering efforts in human history. This was a top-secret government program that aimed to develop the first atomic bombs, which ultimately helped bring around the end of World War II. In this video, we'll take a look at the history, science, and the key players behind the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was launched in 1942 in response to the growing threat of Nazi Germany developing nuclear weapons. Led by the United States, the project brought together some of the world's leading scientists and engineers to develop the technologies needed to create atomic bombs. The project was shrouded in secrecy, with multiple sites across the United States dedicated to different areas of research and development. Now, the project got its name because it was named after the Manhattan Engineer District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which was the military organization that oversaw the project. The name Manhattan was chosen because the district's headquarters were located in Manhattan, New York City. Although the project itself was spread out across several locations throughout the United States, including Los Alamos, New Mexico, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, the Manhattan Engineer District served as a central administrative organization that coordinated the efforts of the various research teams and facilities. The Manhattan Project was led by some of the most brilliant minds of the time, including J. Robert Oppenheimer and Enrico Fermi. Oppenheimer was a theoretical physicist known for his work on quantum mechanics, while Fermi was a physicist and mathematician who made scientific contributions to nuclear and particle physics. The project was also overseen by General Leslie Groves, a military engineer who was responsible for managing the construction of the Pentagon before being put in charge of the Manhattan Project. The other key players of the project include Arthur Compton, a physicist who conducted early experiments on nuclear reactions, and Ernest Lawrence, who invented the cyclotron, a device used to accelerate particles to high energies. Also involved in the Manhattan Project was Leo Szilard, a physicist who first proposed the idea of a nuclear chain reaction, and Niels Bohr, a Danish physicist who made significant contributions to our understandings of atomic structure. The Manhattan Project involved multiple sites across the United States, like we said before, including Los Alamos in New Mexico, where the bomb design was developed, and the Hartford site in Washington State, where plutonium was produced. The project culminated in the Trinity test, which was conducted in Alamogordo, New Mexico on July 16, 1945. This was the first test of nuclear weapons in history and paved the way for the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki a few weeks later. The science behind the Manhattan Project was based on the principles of nuclear fission, which involves the splitting of nucleus of the atoms to release a huge amount of energy. This energy can be harnessed to create a nuclear explosion, as was done in the atomic bombings of Japan. The production of nuclear weapons also required the enrichment of uranium, a process of increasing the concentration of the isotopes uranium-235, which is used in nuclear reactions. This was done through various methods, including gas diffusion, gas centrifusion, and laser-based enrichment. Manhattan Project was a monumental achievement of science and engineering, but it also had significant ethical implications. As Dr. Oppenheimer famously said after the first successful test of the atomic bomb, and quote, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," end quote. The development of nuclear weapons raised profound questions about the limit of the human knowledge and the potential consequences of scientific progress. Now, not everybody believes in or was a fan of the Manhattan Project. One theory suggests that the Manhattan Project never existed, and that the idea of top-secret nuclear weapon program was simply to cover up other activities. Proponents of this theory argue that the government used the Manhattan Project as a propaganda tool to show off their technology and prowess during the Cold War. However, there is a vast amount of historical evidence that supports this existence of the Manhattan Project. The project employed tens of thousands of people and involved construction of mass research facilities and production plants. The development of the atomic bomb also required significant investment in research and development, including the construction of research reactors and the enrichment of uranium and production of plutonium. It also employed like 130,000 people and cost like $30 billion. So, I mean, yeah, I understand being skeptical of the government, but just completely dismissing it, I don't know about that. The next topic is some people think that the use of atomic bombs were unnecessary. The conspiracy theory argues that the use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was unnecessary, and that Japan was already on the brink of surrendering. Some have suggested that the bombings were simply a way for the United States to demonstrate their military might to the Soviet Union during the early days of the Cold War. While it is true that Japan was facing military defeat by the summer of 1945, there is a significant debate among the historians about whether the use of the atomic bombs was necessary to bring around Japan's surrender. Some argue that Japan was already seeking peace, while others point out the high casualty rates that were anticipated in this potential invasion of the Japanese mainland. I'm not going to pause it on that one. That's open to opinion. So, I mean, war is hell, and that's all I have to say about that. Now, the third one, the government covered up the dangers of radiation. The conspiracy theory suggests that the government knew about the dangers of radiation from nuclear weapons testing and covered it up in order to protect the nuclear weapons program. Some have suggested that the government intentionally downplayed the risk of radiation exposure in order to avoid public opposition to the development of nuclear weapons. While it is true that the government was aware of the dangers of radiation, there is no evidence to suggest that they intentionally covered up this information. In fact, the government actively studied the effects of radiation exposure and implemented safety measures to protect workers involved in nuclear weapons production. However, it is also true that the full extent of the health risks associated with radiation exposure was not fully understood at the time, and it is only in years later that the danger of radiation exposure becomes more widely known. And with that, I'll leave you with a brief overview of the Manhattan Project, its key players, the science behind nuclear weapons. I hope you found this video informative. I hope this pushed you more towards the ethical quandaries of the progress of science. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Always interested in hearing what you nerds have to say, and with that, I'll see you later.